$15 an hour. That's $31,200 a year before tax. It lands as roughly $26,000 after. That's $2,166 a month, $500 a week, $71 a day. You already know what that feels like. The math runs automatically. Rent takes the first chunk. The car takes the second. Groceries, utilities, phone. The rest disappears before you've made a single decision you'd call a choice. And somewhere on the other end of this video, someone earns $1 million a year. Same country, same economy, same price of eggs at the same grocery store. Completely different reality. This video is not about how to get from $15 an hour to $1 million a year. There are 1,000 videos that promise to show you that. This video is about what each level actually looks like, what it feels like, what it costs you, not in dollars, but in decisions, relationships, identity, and time. Because the income levels aren't just financial categories. They are completely different ways of experiencing life. And most people have never been shown the full picture. Stay with me, because somewhere in this video you will recognize exactly where you are. And when you do, you'll understand for the first time why it feels the way it does. And I'll tell you this right now, there is one moment, one specific income level, where everything about how you experience money changes permanently. Not the highest level, not the one you're expecting. We'll get there. $15 an hour. You are 24, maybe 29, maybe 36. The age doesn't define the level. The math does. Your alarm goes off at 6:14 a.m. Not 6:15, 6:14, because that one extra minute feels like something. You shower fast. You eat something portable. You leave before traffic gets bad because you can't afford to be late, and you definitely can't afford a parking ticket. At this income level, life is arithmetic. Constant, exhausting, automatic arithmetic. $847 in rent. $340 car payment. $180 insurance. $120 utilities. $200 groceries if you're careful. You've already spent $1,687 before you've bought a single thing you wanted. You have $479 left for the month. That's $15.96 a day for everything else. Gas, toiletries, clothing, emergencies, entertainment, anything. You don't have a budget. You have a calculation. There's a difference. A budget implies choices. A calculation implies survival. At $15 an hour, the question is never, what do I want? The question is always, what can I afford? And most of the time, the answer is less than you thought. You get paid Friday. By Sunday, the account is already spoken for. Thursday is the hardest day of every week. Thursday is when you check the balance 4 times before 9 a.m. and eat the same lunch you've eaten for 6 weeks because it costs $1.87. And here is what nobody tells you about this level. The exhaustion is not just physical, it's cognitive. Financial stress consumes mental bandwidth. Every small decision carries weight. Every unexpected cost is a crisis, not an inconvenience. The tire that needs replacing, the doctor visit you've been delaying, the phone screen that cracked 3 months ago that you've been living with because $180 feels like a number from a different world. At $15 an hour, money is not a tool. Money is the entire game, and you are playing it with no margin for error. Something shifts at $20 an hour. Not dramatically, not immediately, but structurally. $20 an hour is $41,600 a year before tax. It lands as roughly $34,000 after. That's $2,833 a month. The arithmetic doesn't disappear, but the margin appears. Small, fragile, but real. For the first time, there is a number left at the end of the month that isn't immediately claimed by a bill. It might be $200, it might be $350, but it exists. And that number, that small, quiet surplus, is the beginning of everything. At this level, you start making your first real financial decisions. Not survival decisions, decisions. Do you build an emergency fund or pay down the credit card? Do you save the surplus or use it to replace something you've been putting off? Do you upgrade the apartment or stay in the cheaper one and save the difference? These questions feel enormous at $20 an hour because they are the first real choices you've had. This is also the level where lifestyle inflation makes its first appearance. The small raise feels significant, and the instinct is to spend it. A slightly nicer apartment, a slightly newer car, eating out twice a week instead of 0. Every upgrade makes sense individually. Together, they eliminate the margin, and the margin is everything. The people who use this level as a launching pad, rather than a comfort zone, are the ones who arrive somewhere different 5 years later. $50,000 a year. The salary that sounds decent until you do the full math. After federal tax, state tax, Social Security, and Medicare, you take home roughly $38,000 to $42,000 a year, depending on where you live. That's $3,200 to $3,500 a month. In a low cost of living city, this is functional. In New York, San Francisco, or London, this is survival with different vocabulary. At this income level, you are in what economists call the squeezed middle. You earn too much to qualify for assistance, too little to feel secure. You are exactly in the gap where the financial pressure is invisible to anyone looking from the outside. You have a car that works, an apartment that is fine, you eat well most of the time. You go out occasionally. On paper, you are fine, but the savings rate is low, the emergency fund is thin. One serious medical event, one job loss, one major car repair away from a financial crisis that would take 18 months to recover from. This is the income level where most people plateau, not by choice, but by default. The salary feels like enough to be comfortable and not enough to feel the urgency to change. And that comfort, that dangerous, quiet, sufficient comfort is the trap. At $50,000 to $75,000, the work is not financial. The work is psychological. Breaking the comfort of just enough to build towards something more. The shift, when it comes, is never about the income. It's about the decision to treat this level as a beginning, not a destination. $100,000 a year. The number that sounds like freedom until you actually get there. After tax, depending on your state, you take home roughly $65,000 to $72,000 a year. That's $5,400 to $6,000 a month. And here is the thing nobody prepares you for. At $100,000, for the first time in your adult life, the math works comfortably. Housing, car, food, savings, it all fits without the constant arithmetic of survival. But something else happens at this level that nobody talks about. The lifestyle pressure intensifies, because now you can afford things, and the world notices. The expectations shift from friends, from family, from the version of yourself that spent years saying, when I earn more, I'll finally... The apartment upgrades. The car upgrades. The vacations get taken instead of just planned. The restaurants change category. And the savings rate, which should be accelerating at this income, often stays flat or decreases, because the spending accelerates in proportion to the income. This is the Parkinson's law of personal finance. Expenses expand to fill whatever income is available. $100,000 is also the income level where two people in the same city, earning the same salary, can have completely different financial trajectories, based entirely on whether they protect their savings gap. One of them builds wealth at $100,000. The other just has a more expensive version of the same financial stress they had at $50,000. The income is the same. The decisions are everything. This is the income level I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Not $1 million, not even $500,000. $150,000 to $250,000 a year is where the relationship with money changes permanently. Below $150,000, for most people in most cities, income and lifestyle consume each other. There is money, sometimes significant money, but the cost of living, the taxes, the basic expectations of life at that income level leave a margin that requires deliberate effort to protect. At $150,000 to $250,000, for the first time, the margin becomes substantial enough that the money can genuinely work independently of the lifestyle. You take home $95,000 to $155,000 a year after tax, depending on location. The lifestyle is comfortable, genuinely comfortable, not fine that sounds comfortable. Housing is handled. The car is handled. Food, travel, occasional luxury, and there is still a meaningful surplus. Not a fragile $200 margin, a real, investable, deployable surplus. This is the level where wealth can actually be built on a salary alone. If the lifestyle is held at $100,000 equivalent, and the income has reached $200,000, the gap between them, invested consistently, creates a compounding machine that reaches critical mass within a decade. The psychological shift is the most significant you will ever experience around money, because for the first time, you stop making decisions about money from fear, and you start making them from strategy. Fear-based decisions. Can I afford this? Strategy-based decisions. Should I deploy capital here? It sounds like a semantic difference. It is not. It is a complete rewiring of how the mind processes financial choices, and that rewiring, once it happens, cannot be undone. At $500,000 a year, you enter a world that most people don't know exists. Not because it's secret, because it's quiet. You take home roughly $290,000 to $320,000 after federal and state taxes, depending on structure and deductions. The lifestyle at this level, for people who arrived here deliberately rather than accidentally, often looks surprisingly modest from the outside. The car is nice, but not exotic. The house is large, but not a compound. The vacations are real, but not the private jet version. Because the people at this level who are building, not spending, understand something that looks counterintuitive from the outside. The spending is not the point. The deployment is. At $500,000 a year, the question is no longer, can I afford this? It's not even, should I deploy capital here? It becomes, what is the highest return use of this dollar? A $50,000 vacation versus a $50,000 investment in a business that returns 3 times, these are the actual decisions. Not dramatic ones, quiet ones made in spreadsheets and conversations that don't look like financial decisions from the outside. At this income level, the social world changes completely. Conversations about money, the kind most people have, about bills and salaries and how much things cost, simply stop happening in your circle. Not by design, by altitude. The people around you are operating in the same financial language, and the translation to lower levels becomes genuinely difficult. Not from arrogance, but from the simple reality that the decisions are different. This is also the level where tax strategy becomes a full discipline. The difference between a sophisticated tax structure and a basic one, at $500,000 income, can be $60,000 to $100,000 a year. That's a full salary for most people, saved or lost based on structure. $1 million a year. Before you imagine what this looks like, understand what it actually is. After taxes, federal, state, the various mechanisms that apply at this level, you take home somewhere between $450,000 and $600,000 depending on structure, location, and how the income is generated. A W-2 earner at $1 million pays very differently than a business owner at $1 million. A real estate investor at $1 million pays very differently than a hedge fund manager at $1 million. At this level, the income source is the strategy, not just what you earn, how it's structured, where it's held, what vehicle it flows through. $1 million a year in salary is not the same as $1 million a year in business income, is not the same as $1 million a year in capital gains. The after-tax results can differ by $200,000 or more based purely on structure. This is why the people at this level employ teams, accountants, tax attorneys, wealth managers, estate planners, not because the decisions are complex, because the cost of getting them wrong is enormous. At $1 million a year, the lifestyle is real and significant. But for the people at this level who are actually building, not consuming, the lifestyle is still a minority of the income. The majority is being deployed into businesses, into real estate, into funds and structures and positions that produce returns independently of the person's time and labor. The identity at this level has shifted completely from where it started. You do not think of yourself as someone who earns money. You think of yourself as someone who deploys capital. And the distance between those two identities, between the $15 per hour version of you and the $1 million version, is not just financial. It is a completely different relationship with time, risk, other people, and what money actually is. Here is what the full spectrum tells us. Every income level has its own psychological reality, its own set of decisions, its own traps, its own pressures. At $15 per hour, the trap is survival, consuming all available bandwidth. At $50,000, the trap is comfortable enough to stop pushing. At $100,000, the trap is lifestyle expanding to consume the income. At $250,000, the opportunity is the gap, if you protect it. At $500,000, the game becomes deployment, not earning. At $1 million, the architecture is the strategy. And the single thread running through every level, from the $71 a day arithmetic to the capital deployment decisions of the top earners, is the gap. The gap between what you earn and what you spend. At every level, in every tax bracket, in every city and country and economic situation, the gap is the variable that determines whether you are building or treading water. The income is the input, is the lever. Most people spend their entire lives trying to increase the input. The people who build wealth at every level, obsess over the lever. This video doesn't trend, it doesn't have a villain, it doesn't resolve in a news cycle, it doesn't lend itself to a 60-second short that goes viral. It requires you to sit with the full picture, to see your current level clearly, to understand the traps at the next level before you get there, and to start making decisions based on where you're going rather than where you are. That's not content, that's education, and education doesn't trend, but it compounds. If you want to understand the financial journey the way it actually works, the full picture, the real traps, the decisions that matter at every level, subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're going to cover every level of this journey, and none of it looks the way the highlight reel shows you. The gap is the lever. Protect it at every level.